That was Sting, and this is chapter 10 of It's a Mistake. Pana and Lynn sat in a monorail car heading into Eurorca's countryside. They passed a bit of desolate area, but a vast plantation soon grew up alongside the road. Rows of vegetation with paths between them wide enough to allow maintenance and harvesting vehicles grew for 5 or 6 miles and extended back at least that far. At first, Pana thought these were plant, but gradually he began to notice differences in crop types. Much of the vegetation was sugarcane, while others grew for medicinal value. Tombra wondered aloud if plant was somewhere in these fields. Lynn said she didn't believe so. She was under the impression plant was grown in a secured greenhouse. Pana asked the obvious question of why it needed to be guarded if they gave it away. He hated obvious questions, and she placed an index fingertip between her teeth while thinking. Control, I guess, she said, after a moment's thought, and then decided against it. I don't know. Maybe not. Actually, he said, while considering her thought, that makes sense. A shadow passed over his face as they went under a bridge. The concrete structure was part of an access road connecting a foul-smelling factory to the highway. It does? Lynn was surprised. Few Eurorcans had ever told her that something she'd said made sense. Her lavender-pink eyes widened in excitement. Well, yeah. Fauna saw her uncertainty and smiled encouragingly. Beings will often go to great lengths to control things that don't really need controlling, Lynn. It's a survival reflex. I guess. Average beings discover we have little control over anything if we're paying any attention, so we must give up trying. Go with the flow. Granted, it takes a long time to see it, but I think most eventually do. Have you found that, Lynn? Yeah. Being a nurse makes you very aware of how much things can change in just seconds. But we're also not in charge of anything, so feeling in control is not a job hazard. Well, there you go. But those who have power have a greater illusion of having it. They get laws passed on or manipulate the public to act in certain ways or believe certain things. Fear is a useful tool for them. The public's cooperation has the feel of control, and that illusion further feeds their ego. The control freak usually gets even nuttier then, and overreaches. Cracks begin to form in their dam, and the rungs to climb out get slippery. Chaos creeps through, and the illusion eventually collapses. At that point, the control freak usually takes their stolen wealth and deserts. Stupid, but that's what gives me stories. Everything's connected, Lynn, and stupidity has been good to me. Pana laughed at his own humor. She stared at him as if he were the universal master himself. Wow! You have a great intelligence, Lynn. I can see it, but I'll bet you haven't been encouraged to use it. Therefore, you think I'm making sense. He smiled as she looked down and grinned. I'm not a savior, just a journalist who's seen an awful lot. Don't treat me as if I'm any smarter than you. I'm not. Okay? Okay, she felt sheepish. You're right, though, about the not being a savior part anyway. They laughed. Out the window, several tall buildings appeared deeply set into the crop field. They formed a circle with short breaks between them and bridges connecting their roofs. Between those gaps, Pana could see there were other structures within, but no detail was discernible. Lynn pushed a button on her armrest and the car stopped in front of a path leading toward the ring. A sign proclaimed that they were entering Stonehenge. "This is our stop," she said with a bit more authority. They were in her element, and Pana smiled at her change in tone. They set off down the path in silence. Pana kept a sharp watch with all four eyes for security measures. He did notice small silver nodes on the ground that could have been decorations or cameras. Pana was betting on cameras. After 5 minutes, the path ended at a smaller building sitting in front of the circular compound like an igloo. Pana was reminded of a turtle trying to hide among tall reeds. They mounted a few steps and stood in front of a wide door. Burnt into the polished tan wood was a 9-pointed green leaf radiating palmately from the stem. Below the leaf read, "Cannabis sativa." Pana pushed the heavy door and a blast of cold air struck them like a train's backwash. Lynn explained that pot employees were a warm-blooded species of Urorkans, so needed cold air or they got sluggish. Pana furrowed his eyebrows and his eyes flashed with deep irritation. He hated anything cold. There was nothing for it, though, so he reopened the door and they went inside. The room was also uncomfortable in a sterile way. It was completely white except for bricks of green plant adorning shelves. Pana began to shiver and noted they were the only visitors. Racks held magazines for sale that contained pictures of the buildings, fields, and corporate managers. They needed dusting. The magazines, not the managers. But Pana picked one up and thumbed through it. A green, scaly woman with a demeanor that matched the room greeted them from her desk opposite the door. "Hello? I am Anne LaRue. May I help you?" Pana chuckled at the rhyme. He tried to affect a friendly demeanor by waving hello. "Yes, I'd like to buy this. We were also wondering if it's possible to get a tour of your complex." LaRue obviously didn't like the rhyme caused by her name, and her tongue quickly flicked out. She sucked it back in and said she'd check. LaRue then slithered into a portal behind her desk. A few minutes later, she emerged with a mail in tow. Pana introduced himself, but didn't think to do so for Lynn. He wasn't used to her presence yet, so she volunteered her name with an irritated glance at Tombro. He felt stupid. "Weber Pallet. Nice to meet you. Anne tells me you'd like a tour." Anne LaRue sat at her desk and returned to her computer console. "Please, follow me." Pallet jovially led them into his office. He invited them into chairs before his desk while getting seated into his own. Pallet's desk wrapped around him in a U-shape, which he knew gave him greater authority. Pana also knew this, so wasn't intimidated. Pana further noticed Pallet's office offered no greater warmth. Pallet poured herb tea from a brewing machine behind him and handed each visitor a cup. Pana eagerly wrapped his hands around the cup just to warm them up. "We don't conduct actual tours of the complex," Pallet explained apologetically. "But may I attempt to answer some questions? Or be of service in some other way?" His tongue, like LaRue's, flicked in and out at the end of sentences. Well, I'm writing a piece about corporate success stories, and yours is certainly one of the most successful. Pana turned on his digipad while he spoke. Weber's smile nearly eclipsed his rather flat head, and his wide round eyes, blinking from time to time, peered intently at the pair. "So I'd like to ask some questions about how you've achieved it." "Certainly, being Pana. But I can't tell you much, as most of our operation is, unscrutinized." He seemed pleased at his word. We stay pretty quiet. Writing. Writing for whom? Pana levelly returned contact with Pallet's black slits, but kept his demeanor casual. GPS. I'm a columnist. Community pieces, mostly. He hoped Pallet might become nervous, but flattered enough to say a few things that he shouldn't. Pallet only blinked nonchalantly. He was far too professional for such a mistake. Over the next 20 minutes, Pana fidgeted while extracting virtually nothing from him. He learned only the company's age, not important, the owner's name, Olivia King, original product, a dark cream-filled cake, goals for the community, we want to help. And that's it. And that it supplied uniforms for a children's sports team, a game called baseball. Weather showed them a group image of smiling kids huddled around a small mound of dirt. Pana then asked him about Plant. Why did they give it away for free? For the health of each individual. This is one way we can support the community, you see. What are its properties? We can't say that. How is it cultivated? Carefully, with great attention to organic purity. Our high-security greenhouse allows us full control over the air, light, and soil, Mr. Pana. We want it to be of the highest quality and health benefits. Where is the greenhouse? Pana asked hopefully. I've forgotten. Been a while since I've seen it. Pana frowned and let go a single snort, conveying unamused disbelief. When was Plant discovered? Depends. As I understand it, Plant was discovered, forgotten, discovered again, and forgotten again before our founder, Olivia King, rediscovered it again. Pana asked where that had occurred, and Pallet chuckled. In his college dorm room, Mr. Pana. A friend of his had some. Pana nodded and turned off his digipad. Okay, thanks, he told Pallet. You've been very helpful. I've got enough to do some greater research on my own, though. Pana said it hoping to rattle Weber, but primarily because he had become impatient to leave. It occurred to him that the frigid temperature might be partly to discourage visitors. Who would want to stay very long in this? Weber Pallet actually laughed. Well, good luck. Possibly another company would be more interesting to your readers. I know of one on Darwin that's very exciting. It's just in the next quadrant. Darwin, eh? I've been there. Thanks, though. Pana shook back his hair, stood and headed out the portal. Lynn followed, and Pallet followed her. They thanked Anne LaRue, paid for the magazine, and left for a warmer climate. That was a bust. Lynn grinned. Anne's? They weren't that nice. Tombra looked at her for several seconds before blinking. I meant that it didn't go well. I know, Lynn's playful smile improved his mood, and it was at that moment that Pana fell in love with her. He hoped it was just lust, though, and wouldn't last. I have to find out which of these buildings, he indicated the compound as he spoke, is the greenhouse. It's not obvious, is it? I've always thought greenhouses looked the same. Guess not. After determining that, I'll have to figure out a way in. Sounds exciting, Lynn's smile turned conspiratorial. Pana grinned at her. It does. I hope it's not simply fatal. Thank you. We'll see you in Chapter 10.